The Olympus Mju series of cameras are important, popular, and long-lasting. But they were never really meant to be that way. This is the Olympus Mju 1. Introduced in 1991, it's a simple 35mm compact camera with a fixed f3.5 lens, autofocus, and a flash. The Mju 1 and its sequel, the Mju 2, go for a ton of money on eBay, and photography YouTube loves to talk about them as legends of the street photography world.
I always praise the Mju 1.
Today we're taking a look at the Olympus Mju 2.
And the, what is it, Olympic Stylus Mju?
And that's pretty weird when you think about it, because the Mju's original designers almost certainly saw their camera as a tool for casual shooters and families. It's a plastic camera, it's totally automatic, and one of its main selling points at the time was that it was one of the first cameras to have a flash mode designed to prevent red eye. And people forget that the super zoom version of this camera were actually way more popular. The Mjus were super successful for Olympus in the 1990s, and they sold about 20 million units worldwide.
It's so smart, so serious, yet so small that you'll never again say to yourself, "Oh, I wish I had my camera."
But then the digital revolution happened, and everyone basically forgot that these cameras existed, at least until 2010, when film enthusiasts started buying them up like crazy. But why? Like music and sneakers, the photography world has plenty of movements and subcultures. Sometimes they're a little hard to see, especially in a post-Flickr world where photography groups have a harder time coalescing around the weak anchor points that are hashtags. And one of these subcultures is snapshot art, a snapshot photograph intended to function as something more. The elevation of snapshot photography runs back through major fine art movements led by photographers like William Eggleston and Robert Frank in the middle of the 20th century. You can see it in the skating photography of the 70s or the grunge photography of the 90s, and more recently, high fashion photographers who follow figures like Terry Richardson.
Terry Richardson is not your typical fashion photographer.
There's people at home that have better cameras than I do, you know.
When he first started shooting, I said, that's what he's working with, that's what he always uses.
Even Diane said to me at one point, is this going to be okay? Will we be able to see the bathing suits?
And he says, that's my best kept secret. This is what I shoot with.
I mean, I used to just use regular, focus cameras, and my eyes were really bad, and I had a really hard time focusing cameras. So I bought a snapshot camera, and I just started taking pictures with it. Found that the quality was just as good, and they were just so much easier and more free to use.
So when film became cool again, there were plenty of people who were more interested in chasing the hazy aesthetic of these snapshot photographers, rather than the carefully composed, creamy orange Coachella lifestyle shots that an SLR probably works better for. So starting in 2010, we saw much the same pattern repeated for a lot of old film gear. First, people snatch up the premiere stuff for bargain prices. That's the Hasselblads and the Nikon F1s or the Contax T5s for compact camera lovers. Then, once the prices of the premium stuff are jacked all to hell, people start looking for substitutes, the almost as goods, or perhaps I should say, almost as cools.
You brought your camera.
Yes, I did.
This is the one you use now?
My little contact.
And that's how you take that beautiful photo?
This is actually a different camera.
In the compact world, first went the Contax T5s, then the Ricoh GR1s, then the Yashica T4s, and the Konica Hexars, on down the line until we finally got to well-built, but otherwise unremarkable compact cameras like the Olympus Mju 1. Now, people write about Olympus Mjus like they were always a legend and a status symbol, like they were always cool, when the reality is they're more like a rediscovered classic. Something that has found a new appreciation in a new context in a new day. And if we want to look at the popularity of cameras like the Olympus Mju generously, we can call it a reaction against the technocentrism of the conversation around photography today. It says, stop telling me about the lenses I need to buy, the new camera bodies with image stabilization and an espresso maker. I don't want to spend several hours tweaking the curves and the filters on my iPhone picture. Give me a black box that takes a picture when I press a button. Done. When I look at photographers that make this style of work, I'm reminded that people will forgive weird colors and blur and fuzziness in an image if it captures something truly unique and honest, or at the very least just fucking strange. And yes, you could do that kind of work with a DSLR or a digital compact or even an iPhone, but most people don't. And maybe that's plenty enough reason to justify the resurrection of little cameras like these.